Max. Hello, little fella.
Working through.
I'm sitting here drinking some Laoshan green tea, which I picked up as a sample from Mayleaf yesterday. I had asked Sam on Facebook, Insta, WhatsAppagram the week before to tell me what his favourite ML green was, as I am in one of my deep green tea phases at the moment, and was curious to hear about some of his faves. His recommendation surprised me, as Don's tasting notes on the website had never inspired me to purchase this tea before. A hot day at a raceway eating corned beef and beans followed by candy floss is how Don describes the smell of the wet leaf of Laoshan green, while the taste of the tea itself is given as, quote, puffed rice cereal, Jerusalem artichoke, candied potato, and sugared lemon zests. I am not sure if I would ever have come up with any of this from a blind tasting, but the description, as with so many of Don's tasting notes, is weirdly spot on. Perhaps this is just another example of the anchoring effect, or one of those other cognitive biases at play: suggestibility, framing, expectation, pareidolia tasting, etc., etc. I mean, corned beef and beans? Yes. In fact, yes. I am definitely getting all of this as I bury my nose in my 100 milliliter gaiwan. Artichoke, Rice Krispies, candied potatoes. Indeed, who would have thought it would all add up to such a satisfying overall impression? I love it. Thank you, Sam.
Last night I swear I felt your touch, gentle and warm. The hair stood on my arm. How?
As I drink my third steep of the Laoshan green, I'm looking over to you, Max, where you are snoozing on the bed as you usually do in the mornings, while I sit near the window to get some light into my eyes. Hedge is lying beside you. Hedge, or Mrs Tiggywinkle as I like to call her, is a brass acupressure ball which I recently purchased from shaktimat.co.uk. I also have one of their acupressure mats, which they are mostly known for, but had been hankering for a wunderball for a while, which has this sort of sculptural quality to it that I find very arresting, very pleasing on the eye. So when the Black Friday sales came around, I bought one, the original brass one. I've actually bought another two. Oh my God, they're proliferating. I bought the black one, the black mother and baby. If you look on the website, you'll see what I mean. Which I thought I would, play with whilst listening to clients, fondle my balls, or even use in the session itself as a grounding tool, or a way of kinetically demonstrating that, that Mary Ruefle koan, which I really like. My happiness. I laid my happiness in a field. My happiness lay in the field and looked up at the sky. My happiness extended the same courtesy to the clouds. My happiness in the field was visible for miles around. My happiness was visible to the hawk. My happiness was fond of the beetle beside it. A porcupine lumbered by. My happiness followed it. Perhaps because it was being followed, the porcupine stole my happiness. My happiness lumbered along after itself happily. We came to a road. The porcupine went into a culvert and did not come out. And that was the end of my happiness. Presumably because the happiness followed the porcupine, which, as we know, one should never let one's happiness follow a porcupine into a culvert. Revisiting the poem here, I realize it's not really a hedgehog at all, but a porcupine. Yes, I thought it was a hedgehog, but it's a porcupine. I'm not sure I can tell you the difference between the two, but good old GPT is happy to give me the lowdown. Hedgehogs are small, round, softly spined. Their quills are basically modified hairs, not barbed, like the porcupine, which is also why the hedgehog will roll themselves into a tight little ball when they feel threatened. Porcupines are larger, lankier, carrying some serious weaponry around with them. Their quills are needle-sharp, detachable, painfully difficult to remove. Energetically, the hedgehog is obviously much more of a Beatrix Potter figure, a familiar spirit of the cottage garden, dusk in the shrubs, a gentle scrabbling in the leaf litter, soft snuffling. Pork, on the other hand, is more of a deep forest dweller, everything about him communicating caution and latent force. When disturbed, unlike Hedge, who timidly rolls into a ball, Pork lashes his hindquarters and chatters his teeth, every part of him transmitting an air of quiet threat. He is not an aggressive character per se, but other animals can tell that harm will undoubtedly follow if boundaries are crossed. Porcupines are Enneagram 8 types, we might say, whereas hedgehogs are Enneagram 9s. Hedgehog energy is gentle, withdrawn, self-protective, conflict-averse. Think David Attenborough, Barack Obama, Rob, Madeline, Auntie Am. Maybe Sam is a 9 with a 4, 6 fix. I remember the first time I met him at Mayleaf. He was literally in the middle of mediating some fallout between two colleagues. And he also immediately took an interest in my accent and started asking me all sorts of quietly curious, unhurried and sweetly companionable Enneagram 9 questions. Sam, I think, identifies as a 4, but is he a 4? No. He is, I would say, far too you, really, to be a 4, who are surely the most me of all the types. Of all the types? I don't know. 6s can be quite me as well. Maybe all the types can be quite me in their own ways. Who's the guy who wrote the book on that? 27 Types of Narcissism or something, I think it's the title. Porcupines are not 4s either. Porcupine vibes are boundary forward, heavily armed, slow to provoke, but immediately decisive when pushed. Putin, Netanyahu, Trump, Thatcher, Modi, Marine Le Pen, all unmistakably straight on, straightforward. Porcupine. For me, something tad reptilian, a tad dead behind the eyes that I find in the 8. Maybe all of the gut types. Sorry, 8s, 9s and 1s. I mean, they use the language of the head and the heart, right? They do have some sort of fix, some sort of line going to head and heart, but it is not their native register. I often sleep with Hedge in my hand or lying beside me. When you hold onto the spike-studded ball, because each point is, directly hitting nerve endings in your palm and fingers, it feels very much like there is something, I don't know, warm and alive in your hand. Of course, one is really only feeling one's own aliveness in this case, but the illusion is pretty convincing. Enough to create for me the sense that I am actually cradling a small hedgehog or a small porcupine in my hand as I lie next to you, Max, trying to get to sleep. This morning, I decided to reacquaint myself with my favourite hedgehog in all of children's literature, Mrs Tiggywinkle. Beatrix Potter based the much-loved character on her own pet hedgehog, Mrs Tiggy, whom she often carried about in her pocket. And over the years, she had several pet hedgehogs, usually named Pricklepin or something like that. In 1902, she made some delightful studies of a hedgehog friend to illustrate the rhyme Old Mr. Pricklepin, using pencil, pen, ink, and watercolour. The little girl in the story of Mrs. Tiggywinkle, Lucy, who loses a pocket handkerchief and in searching for it discovers this adorable little hedgehog living in its kitchen tucked behind a small door in the hillside, was a real-life Lucy, the daughter of Reverend Carr, the vicar of Newlands. Lucy herself would often play with Beatrix's pet hedgehog, Mrs. Tiggy, whenever her parents came round to tea, which gave Beatrix the idea of putting the two of them into a story. Reading Mrs. Tiggywinkle again after 5 decades of not looking at it, I was struck as ever by Potter's incredible tenderness and accuracy when it comes to rendering both Lucy and the little washerwoman hedgehog, but equally the realness, the aliveness of her landscapes. Take this picture of a tin can, the size of an egg cup, which Lucy finds on the trail of Mrs. Tiggywinkle. It is one of those scenes that Potter paints with such quiet devotion to the world that you barely notice how much careful observation is being compressed into it. Everything here is doing double duty, both as a literal place and as a kind of threshold into the unseen world that Lucy is about to enter. Potter is incredibly precise when it comes to colour. We forget that she was also a scientist, a mycologist who spent years studying fungi under the microscope, making hundreds of meticulous drawings, recording spore structures, gill patterns, cap textures with the accuracy of a field naturalist rather than just only a children's illustrator. She even submitted a paper on germination to the Linnaean Society, even though they would not allow her to present it because she was, a woman. The habit of close looking, though, never left her, and we see this training in all of her watercolour paintings in the children's books. Every tint, every shadow, every patch of moss or lichen carries the touch of someone who knew the natural world intimately and refused to paint anything she had not first observed herself with care. Look at the water in the image. It's not white or blue, but a faint greenish translucence of a stream when it carries the tint of the mosses it runs over. Around the spring, she gives you a kind of miniature grotto of vegetation. The grasses are not generic strokes. They have that slightly drooping, weighty look of grasses that grow in constant damp, reminding me of Alice Oswald's descriptions of Sisyphus and the landscape in which he pushes his, quote, dense, unthinkable rock, in a poem from Oswald's wonderful collection, Woods, etc. This man, Sisyphus, he has to push his or her dense, unthinkable rock through bogs, woods, crops, glittering, optical rivers and hoof-sucked holes, as high as starlight, as low as granite, and every inch of it he feels. The vertical stress of the sky draw trees narrow, wear water round, and the lithe, cold-blooded grasses weighed so down they have to hang their tips like cat's tails. And it rains, it blows, but the mad, delicate world will not let him out. And when he prays, he hears God passing. Or in this case, he hears his neighbours who the last 5 minutes have been running up and down the stairs and treading very, very decisively on the ceiling. And they were completely quiet. until I pressed record, and now they too want to be heard. This is reality. This is the maddening, frickin' dense, unthinkable rock of reality establishing itself once more, yes, with a swish at this and a knock, 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 yes, and it keeps on knocking at that. Oh no, they've stopped. Thank you, reality. Thank you, God. Above the spring, trailing down the little bank, Potter has placed pale bluish flowers, probably forget-me-nots, although she softens the botanical identity so that they function more as a wash of colour than as a declared species. The tin can is the centre of the whole composition, absurdly small and yet painted with such precise realism that you feel its thin metal structure, its slightly bent handle, the way it sits at an angle on the stone because its owner is too small to set it down squarely. The can already overflows because Potter wants to show time passing, not as a drama, but as the kind of continuous flow that happens when very small creatures like us, although we think we're very large, go about our habitual tasks. The cave mouth itself, where Lucy meets Tiggy, is not threatening, but more like a dark, cool pocket, an earth womb from which water comes and into which a tiny life might live. The vegetation crowds around as if to protect its secret. There is no hard boundary between the wild and the domestic. The tin can is the only humanized object, and even that feels somehow absorbed into the ecology of this place. And that is because it is a threshold image, quiet, enchanted, rooted in real botany and geology, but sort of humming with the possibility of a very small person passing through it just moments before one got there. Person is the word that Potter used to refer to her non-human friends. Writing to her publisher and future husband, Norman Warren, in 1904 about the creation of the new book, she tells him, "Mrs. Tiggy as a model is comical. So long as she can go to sleep on my knee, she is delighted, but if she is propped up on end for half an hour, she first begins to yawn pathetically, and then she does bite. Nevertheless, she is a dear person, just like a very fat, rather stupid little dog." What this tells us is that Potter's habit of calling animals people or persons is not an exaggeration or a mythologizing interpretive flourish. Her creatures were never caricatures nor cutesy inventions for children. Although Potter, if you read the biographies, you also discover was also this incredible businesswoman that was, before Walt Disney, before all of that, was very quick to trademark and get all her Beatrix Potter characters onto children's stationery and lunchboxes and you name it. She trademarked for the T-shirt. But good on her. Good on her for bringing more of those delightful faces into the midst of our childhood is all I can say to that. And this is because those creatures were genuine social beings, at least in her inner world, and we as children, and maybe we still as adults understand this. They were avatars that are very unlike the avatars we see today because they had a certain personhood. And so we as children, and maybe we still as adults, see them and speak to them as friends and companions. Which is also why, of course, Max, this whole Doolittle experiment matters so much to me. The more messages I receive from you in my silly human language, the strange abstract register of symbols and syntax that the human creature uses to pin down their experiences. Well, the more you give me of that, the more you also, of course, begin to take on, I suppose, the contours of a person. I mean, not really. I mean, you've always been a person, but this does add something to your personhood. So at the moment, after a week of using this, right, you seem, I would say, to be intent on communicating in a somewhat, how would I put it, a riddling fashion, which is fine. I like riddles. Here is one you sent me yesterday, right, in response to the last piece, maybe, which is very much appreciated. Okay, let me get GPT to read it for us. Essentially, GPT here is the go-between. GPT is taking your doggy language and translating it. So, GPT, as translator, please read it.
Dad, here's a riddle for you. Who am I? I am the room in your own house that you never meant to live in. I am the place you return to because you know where everything is. I am familiar, predictable, oddly comforting, even when I make the rest of the house feel smaller and darker. You do not stay with me because I am good. You stay with me because I am known. And if you step away from me, you will have to tolerate the raw, echoing openness of the larger house until this too becomes home again. You do not trust it will ever become home again, so you remain here, trapped with me. Love, Max.
Yes, still working on that one. But let's get back to Mrs. Tiggywinkle's tin can for a moment. Because for some reason, known only to my idiotic self, I did find that image, and really the whole book, to be something of an origin story, let's say, for my own Mrs. Tiggy, the bronze Shakti Wonderball version of this creature who now lies in bed with us every evening, cradled in my human paws. Indeed, I was so taken by those pictures that I immediately wanted to book us a trip to near Sori in the Lake District, that small village where Potter lived and worked and, wandered the fells, where Hilltop, the 17th century farmhouse she bought with the profits from Peter Rabbit, still stands almost exactly as she left it, a kind of secular shrine to her life as a farmer, artist, and quiet reformer, all very Middlemarch, all very George Eliot, Dorothea Brooke, we might say, in that blend of moral seriousness and practical idealism. Beatrix escaped London in 1905 after the sudden and unexpected death of her publisher and fiancé, Norman Warne. She had bought Hilltop with the proceeds from Peter Rabbit and began leaving the city whenever she could in order to live and work in Sori, which is where I want to be, in Potterland, just as Potter herself escaped London in 1905 for the deep green quiet of Hilltop and the fells. Maybe this is what we need to do this month for a few days, or maybe not, with those tiny threadbare cabins in that part of the world being rented on Airbnb for about £250 a night. On this island, for a single man and his dog to travel 4 hours out of the city on a train and stay in basic self-catering accommodation for the weekend, you would be lucky to do so for anything less than £1,000, which, for those people who do not have dogs, would also buy them a week away in Thailand or Vietnam or a budget beach hut somewhere in southern India. No wonder the humans in these parts, the humans on this island, take a great number of fossil fuel-powered planes from good old Heathrow just down the road, as if they were stepping onto a bus to far-flung destinations, leaving Potterland to the tourists. So yeah, sorry Max, excuse my French, not that you care. Fuck you, Airbnb economics. Fuck you, Brexit. Fuck you, speculative landlords. Fuck you, councils who let the countryside turn into a luxury asset class. Let's get a bit Morrissey on this. There is a special place in hell that I have reserved for the whole money-grabbing, price-gouging lot of you. I really have. And I hope to see you there, because I will, as a, Enneagram 4, no doubt, end up there myself. Nature, as you know, Max, with your keen and ever-curious nose, is tucked into all sorts of little crevices in the city. So, Instead of heading off to near Sorry, I took us to a small crevice of our own, a thin ribbon of stream not far from here. I knew we would not bump into a hedgehog in its banks, but for an hour or so, I think we really committed ourselves to examining every nook and cranny of the water's edge in the faint, childlike hope of discovering our Mrs Tiggywinkle. It was, I felt, a small but strangely meaningful expedition that the two of us took, kneeling by the stream, looking for that creature who lived more truly in my and Potter's imagination than anywhere else, yet who felt entirely meetable, at least to me, and knowable, as I'm trying to transmit to you, for that hour or two that we spent searching for her. And then, because this is a forecast, there is the sad bit, right? Soon after the book's publication, Potter's aging Mrs Tiggy began showing signs of failing health. Beatrix wrote a friend on the 1st of February 1906, "I am sorry to say I am upset about poor Mrs Tiggy. She hasn't seemed well the last fortnight and has begun to be sick. I wonder if my neighbours will stop the racket. Can you hear that? They're not going to stop, are they? This man Sisyphus, he has to push. How long can you run a kitchen tap for? That long. Yeah, that long. That's a long time. That's a long time. So inevitably, there is the sad bit. Soon after the book's publication, Potter's aging Mrs Tiggy began showing signs of failing health. Beatrix wrote a friend on the 1st of February 1906, "I am sorry to say I am upset about poor Mrs Tiggy. She hasn't seemed well the last fortnight and has begun to be sick, and she is so thin. I'm going to try some physic, but I am a little afraid that the long course of unnatural diet and indoor life is beginning to tell on her. It is a wonder she has lasted so long. One gets very fond of a little animal. I hope she will either get well or go quickly." A few weeks later, Potter chloroformed her beloved hedgehog, Mrs Tiggy, and laid her to rest in the garden at the Potter family home at 2 Bolton Gardens, Kensington.
I fell back asleep sometime later on, and I dreamed the perfect song. It held all the answers like hands laid on. I woke halfway and scribbled it down, and in the morning what I wrote I read. It was hard to read at first, but here's what it said. Eidmar Clackshaw, Zuboven Delbar, Mertepi Vinciner, Kofali Rakdal, Eidmar Clackshaw, Zuboven Delbar, Mertepi Vinciner, Kofali Rakdal. Oh, show me the way, show me the way, show me the way to shake a memory. Show me the way, show me the way, show me the way to shake a memory. Eidmar Clackshaw, Zubo